In this presentation, I'll be talking about positivism. This is the second chapter of Michael Crotty's book, The Foundations of Social Research, Meaning and Perspective in the Research Process, published by Sage. It's a book I really think it's worth picking up and having a read of. Positivism comes from what is posited. Posit is to put an idea forward as a basis for argument. Positivism came from the science of thought. It's a scientific testing of ideas, seeking what can be observed or experienced. Social facts are only anecdotes unless they are connected to other social facts when you have more evidence. Comte believed all sciences should have the same method using the epistemology of positivism. He put sciences in a hierarchy with mathematics actually as the most basic, then astronomy, physics, chemistry, biology, and at the pinnacle, sociology. Comte was a good mathematician and unites science in the search for certainty, not mathematical precision. He separates these two. He rejects objective reason, recognizing the influence of social thought and conditions. However, he believed order can be found in scientifically established laws and constant relationships between variables. Very mathematical view of the world. Methods involve observation, experiment, and comparison. So what are the bounds of positivist objectivism and truth? Well, Ludwig Wittgenstein helped link truth to knowledge. He said there's no path to genuine knowledge except science. The verification principle he helped create holds that no statement is meaningful unless it can be verified. This created a challenge for early positivists who would exclude most social sciences, which could be considered, in their view, opinion-based. They are subjective, not objective knowledge that is accurate and certain. Positivism is objectivism, as meaning is assumed to be there and for it to be able to be discovered. It's a mathematicized world. Over time, there has been a softening of the position of positivism. If we go back to Galileo, he had an extreme positivist perspective, and he would dismiss subjective attributes. Colour, taste and smell was to him seen as secondary characteristics because he believed in a purely quantified world, and back in his day those weren't things you could really quantify. Obviously today we can quite easily quantify colour, taste and smell through our measurements. Husserl notes the scientific world itself is just an abstraction of the everyday world, much like a map is just an abstraction of the terrain. It is not the terrain itself, it is a presentation of it. Claims that articulation of scientific knowledge as utterly objective, valid, certain and accurate is therefore in itself an excessive claim of what we can know. Post-positivism perspectives have softened the view. Talk of probability and levels of objectivity give an approximation of truth. So we're seeing a softening of positivism into post-positivism. The view, the epistemology is changing. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle highlighted the limits of positivism. It is impossible to determine the position and the momentum of subatomic particles with accuracy. You can know one or the other. He attributes this to epistemological limits, the what we can know, the way in which we know it. Bohr proposed that this is actually an ontological limit. It's not about the way we know, but to how subatomic particles are, a different reality. Many of the ways we understand the world are not observed following positive method, but are actively constructed. If we think about waves, fields, particles, or wave-particle duality, these were constructed explanations rather than observations of the particle or the wave themselves, merely the influence of them. And we look at our image there, one of those is certainly Heisenberg. Karl Popper said, "Be humble as you are wrong." Popper noted that science is often not direct observation, but rather a guess that sciences then don't prove wrong. So they guess the reason for something happening, and then they manage to not disprove that reason time and time again. He's actually critiquing induction or inductive reasoning, where theory is developed from multiple observations. We may, for instance, believe water boils at 100 degrees C, as we see this many times over. Hume proposed it's illogical to assume that this always happens, as that assumes that there'll never be any change. And Popper therefore states that every scientific fact must remain tentative forever. He proposes we don't prove a theory right, we must try and prove it wrong. Scientists are not disinterested observers, they work in context of theory and therefore are selective. There's a tendency to seek verification, not falsification. And in the face of conflicting evidence, scientists cling to the established theory. They like to hold on to what they already got. You'll know this if any of you go on to become academics, or maybe you are academics, you'll see this. It is actually a political process, even in objectivist, positivist thinking. We don't tend towards falsification. The published papers tend to be verifications, and people will reject your paper because if you're maybe disagreeing with established theory. Seek out radicals and those you disagree with, or at least academically. Thomas Kuhn saw that many of us are schooled in particular ways that influence reasoning. And that means you get stuck in paradigms, in business logics, in ways of thinking. And paradigm shift requires a crisis where more ideas are heard, often from those younger members. New ideas often break the older logics and lead to paradigm shifts. But if you've been schooled in a way and you're clinging to your old reasonings, it's very difficult to shift from that. Paul Fairbrand took this idea to the next level. He espoused anarchy in science was required to achieve progress. His book was famously titled Farewell to Reason. He thought breakthrough was unlikely from those who have been schooled in a paradigm. He's often portrayed as anything goes, but actually he demanded rigour in research that could separate the thinker from the crank, and almost paradoxically in his research you need to be very schooled to understand it. And he himself was heavily academic throughout his life, if you look at his life story. So let's recap on positivism in research. Positivism often posits meaningful reality, and some may make claims of truth. Academics have challenged the certainty of claims for truth. No matter how rigorous the method, research is not objective or certain. Post-positivists make more humble claims for the strength or not of their findings. The process is your justification, your only justification. You are providing just an interpretation of the world, and that's why method and methodology are so very important in academic work. You can present positivist or non-positivist research. This doesn't break into qualitative or quantitative method. Qualitative studies may be positivist. Many are presented of such. An idea is put forward and tested. You cannot confirm findings with quantitative studies, as they do not provide you with a privileged truth over a qualitative study. Often it is presented as such. Positivism requires that an idea is proposed, then studies test how objective or valid or generalizable that is. That is the nativism. You put an idea forward and you test it.